But now to the ongoing fallout following revelations that the Allen Labor government in Victoria made a secret payout to a woman who was sexually assaulted by a transgender murderer who had been moved from a male prison to the minimum security women's one where it happened. Now, sounds like a crime story. I assure you it's not. It is appalling. But the government's yet to offer any formal comment other than some flimsy words from the Minister for Children who was rolled out to the cameras on Friday.
I won't get into the specificities of individual cases. I don't do that in my own portfolio. I certainly won't do it in other people's portfolios.
She just squirmed and squirmed and squirmed. No detail whatsoever. Joining me now, Rachel Wong, Chief Executive Officer of Women's Forum Australia. Rachel, there's so many elements to this issue. Let's just start with the first one, the instance of finding out that there was obviously confirmation of sexual assault from a biological man against a female prisoner in a women's prison, and that we know it happened because there was a payment by taxpayers and it's been kept secret. We obviously know about it now. What can you tell us in terms of detail beyond that?
Look, I mean, obviously, Peter, we just found out about this on Friday, and we found out with the rest of the country that the Victorian Labor government seems to have been hiding this instance of sexual assault for the last 4 years from the general public. What's particularly concerning is that we have been advocating with this government for 4 years since we found out that a sex offender was being housed in the Dame Phyllis Frost Women's Prison, and again last year as well with another sex offender. And the entire time the government has been saying, you know, nothing to see here, no problems, etc. And this entire time they've known about this sex offender, the sex offender, this man who's committed sexual assault against this woman in this prison. And so we don't have any further details of the payout. Why it's been kept secret is beyond me, why there hasn't been transparency and accountability, why it's taken 4 years for this woman to receive any form of justice, and why there hasn't been any criminal prosecution, assumingly, of this case. I'm not sure.
And what I understand too, the perpetrator of the sexual assault is a murderer, convicted murderer. And the murderer was placed in a women's prison, which was minimum security. That staggers me. Is that because when they decided they were transgender, that they were a woman, that was the only available prison for them or available bed for them? I'm not sure. We can't get that sort of detail. But where is this individual now? Are they still behind bars given they've been convicted of murder? What do we know, Rachel?
My understanding is that they went out on parole in 2024 from the reporting that occurred on Friday, and that they were moved to a male prison after the assault that happened in 2022. But what's quite interesting is that this assault was actually reported on in The Age back in October 2022. And at that time, it said that the allegations had been made, but they hadn't been substantiated, and that the case hadn't gone further any forward. And so I'm not quite sure what's happened between then and now for this to have finally been addressed by the government and for this woman to finally have received some form of justice. But things are very, very murky when it comes to this case, and I think that the Victorian government has a lot of questions to answer.
All right, give us a sense of what's happening around the country in relation to biological men in women's prison. What do we know in other states?
So last year, there were a lot of revelations that came out around the country on this issue. In South Australia, there has been multiple allegations now of sexual assault against a trans-identified male offender who had been housed in a women's prison in Adelaide. Those stories were obviously horrific, and that is part of the reason that the Victorian government actually finally committed, after dodging the question for years, to update its policy, which obviously hasn't been done adequately. And so that's South Australia. New South Wales, they have also in the past allowed men in women's prisons. Apparently now they are saying they don't do that, and yet their corrections policy hasn't been updated to reflect that. Same goes for Queensland. We don't know of any male prisoners that have actually been housed in women's prisons there. The government recently said that it would not be transferring a male murderer who requested to be transferred to a women's prison because he's transitioning. But again, their policy hasn't been updated to reflect that. The only state that really has taken leadership on this issue is the Northern Territory, which last year, after we wrote to them and the rest of the leaders around the country and after the revelations in South Australia, they put an immediate ban on male offenders in women's prisons.